My next guest has an incredible story of resilience, of coping with grief on several levels, overcoming it, and coming out the other side a stronger person. I was inspired by her story, and I hope that you all will be too. Her name is Jenny Hahne. Jenny, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Glad to be here.
I should have asked you this off camera. Did I pronounce your last name right?
You did, actually, and I'm very impressed.
Thank you. Thank you. I was hoping that would be the case. Now, I heard your story. We talked off camera about this a little. I heard your story, and I thought that you have an amazing story of resilience and strength. And I think that people can probably relate on at least some level to the things that you've experienced. That's why I wanted to tell it. And for you, your story started in 2007. Your mother passed away due to symptoms of multiple sclerosis. Do you mind telling me about your mom and about your relationship and talk about what happened to her?
Sure. The story started even before that. As a little girl, I mean, my mom was diagnosed with MS, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with MS, but it can be very progressive and debilitating and very difficult to watch somebody go through. And so she ended up, at one point using a cane, and then, it moved on to a wheelchair, and then she became bedridden. And my father, who's an amazing father, took care of my mom, worked a full-time job, and took care of myself and my sister. And my mom was just somebody that really inspired me as far as living life, because she couldn't due to her illness. And so she always told me, get out there and enjoy life. You never know what's going to happen, and to travel and, to live well. She was in a lot of pain towards the end. And, when she passed away, it was at the point where she couldn't get out of bed and really needed a lot of care. And of course it was very difficult, but, it also relieved her pain.
Sure,
yeah.
Isn't that what Selma Blair has, the actress?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and she has become a spokesperson because she's very public about her fight,
Yes, absolutely. My mom's sister. My mom, there were four siblings, and her sister had MS as well and passed away too. Mm-hmm.
I didn't know. Is that something that's genetic? Really?
Yes. Yeah. It can skip generations. Myself and my sister, never had MS. The good news is nowadays, that was years ago. There's much better treatment, and there's a range. It can range from, being pretty mild to being pretty debilitating. And my mom had a pretty debilitating illness.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you talked about your sister. Now, at the time that this happened, I believe your sister was 22 years old.
Yeah.
And after your mom passed, and a lot of people struggle with loss. And when your mom passed, your sister had a hard time with it. And I understand that she kind of got in with the wrong crowd and developed a drug habit. Can you talk about your sister and how, I guess she must have obviously had a strong relationship with your mom. Talk about her and her, the way she dealt with that loss and what happened to your sister.
Sure. So, Jimmy, like you and I were talking about resiliency a little bit off camera, and for whatever reason, life was a little bit easier for me than it was for my sister. Very sensitive, more of an internal person. Really spent a lot of time with my mom. And when my mom was ill and, dying, my sister really had a hard time, and she couldn't cope in ways that I could. I really, found ways outside of the family with friends and just passions to cope and just, I don't know, something inside of me, I was able to cope with it a little bit different than my sister. And she actually turned to heroin. This was somebody who never even drank, never partied. She was a pretty straight and narrow kid. And I was 25 at the time. So actually during that last year, she only used heroin for, I want to say, a year.
Really?
So during that last year when my mom was really ill, my father and I were also dealing with my sister's drug addiction. And she was in and out of rehab, run-ins with police. It was, there's a couple ways when there's a heroin addiction that it's going to go. Either you stop or you don't, and eventually you pass away, right? And so my sister, like me, we're both little, skinny, and, it just it just really, she couldn't handle it. And so my sister passed away 7 months after my mom passed away of an accidental overdose. So this whole story is kind of a domino effect to me.
Yes.
So like, right. So like, you know, literally the catalyst being my mom's illness, you know, which led to my mom passing away, which led to my sister not being able to cope. And then my father found my sister. She had passed away in her sleep. She was living with him at the time. I was not. I was in graduate school. So I was living in the city. I was living in Chicago. And my father woke up and found her passed away, which kind of led to his mental health really spiraling and PTSD and his inability to cope then with the loss of his wife and his daughter within 7 months.
It's unbelievable. And again, we talked off camera about my story. I lost my dad and my sister inside of about a year and a half.
Right.
And so I can understand, you know, what it must have been like for your father. And now, I'm sure when you got that phone call, and this is almost a not a mean thing to say, but was that an expected phone call for you, or did you think she was kind of past it at that time?
You know, that's interesting that you say that. No, you know, because like my mom's death was so raw, you know, and at that time, my sister, you know, drug addiction is up and down, right? And I kind of thought at that point she was doing better. And honestly, we think, and you hear this a lot, like she wasn't using for a while, and then she went back and was using a level that she couldn't handle, and that's how she ended up passing away. It wasn't intentional, but it was a level her body wasn't used to. So no, I wasn't expecting the call, you know, maybe one day, but not then.
Right. Right. What was her name? Sorry.
Lisa.
Lisa. Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to turn to a different topic. Now
Sure.
you're married, and like a lot of women, you wanted to be a mom. And I understand that you ended up undergoing fertility treatments. Now, infertility is I think more common than people think. I personally know several people just within my circle of friends who have dealt with that problem.
Absolutely.
And I think it's much more common than people think. And I don't want to go off on too long of a tangent, but I had a conversation with a friend of mine. He and his wife had a child through in vitro. And he told me about how friends of his who did the same thing were embarrassed to admit that's how they conceived, and they would come up with stories. And he was very public about it because there's no reason to be embarrassed. Like this is a common thing. In your situation, you're going through these treatments. Can you tell me first about, you know, that process? Because I understand that you went so far as to look for a surrogate.
Oh yeah. So after everything that I went through, you know, it's interesting to kind of look back and see where my headspace was. I was desperate for a family, right? Because I had lost so much of mine. And so I just really wanted a family, and we weren't able to get pregnant, and we were very open about it. And once I started being open about it, then other people kind of coming out of the woodwork, oh yeah, we did fertility treatments, right? But you're right, for whatever reason, there's this stigma out there, but there shouldn't be. You know, however you want to go about having a family, that's okay. And so, so I went through fertility treatments, and it wasn't working, and we had just got to the point where we had done an IUI, and if that didn't work, we were going to do IVF. And it was, I had done the IUI treatment, and I had found a lump. So while you're doing fertility treatments, they're pumping you up with hormones. And I had found a lump on my breast, and at that point, I didn't even know if I was pregnant or not, because I had just done the IUI treatment. And so I went to the doctor, did a biopsy, found out it was cancer. And still at that point, I didn't know if I was pregnant. And then after the cancer diagnosis, shortly after I found out I wasn't pregnant, thankfully so, I guess you could say. I don't know how to look at that, but and then we had to completely stop all the treatment because I could no longer ingest any hormones into my body. Now, doctors say maybe that saved me because I was able to find the cancer quicker, because it was the type of cancer that I had was fed by hormones, right? So it was progesterone and estrogen receptor positive. So I did end up freezing some eggs. And at that point, I started undergoing treatment for cancer. And then after the treatment, after radiation, chemotherapy, and surgery, we did try a surrogate. with the few eggs that I did have. Well, we tried to surrogate a couple different ways. We tried an international surrogate, and we also tried a surrogate here in the U.S., and none of them worked. And then I was out of frozen embryos.
People might not realize this, but in the U.S., from what I understand, surrogacy at that time, the price tag was around $250,000. Is that correct?
So, no, I mean, it kind of depends.
Okay.
So, you hear a lot of stories. I mean, we did go through an agency who then connects you with a surrogate. Sometimes the surrogate you have to kind of pay for everything along the way, their doctor's visits, their travels, or really anything. And so that there could be a range in price, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So anywhere from 50,000, I say 50,000 would probably be the cheapest, all the way up to who knows the price. Yeah. And so we were looking internationally, which kind of was, I don't know where that's at right now, but at the time, that was something that actually my fertility doctor recommended, kind of as a way, looking back, it was myself as a woman kind of empowering a woman in another country who made this decision on her own and was vetted by social workers and, thought as a way where she can make money to support herself and her family. Mm-hmm. And it did not work out. So then we tried a surrogate here with our last two embryos and just said we'd figure out a way to pay for it if it worked. But we kind of had to pay along the way, but that didn't work either.
And your story at that time was actually, I'm sure you know this, it was covered by the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, so I got a random phone call from the Wall Street Journal. They had somehow found my name because there was, kind of some controversy and some things going on with the international surrogacy world. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And this was a popular choice for a lot of women, going through the same issue, again, because of the price tag in the U.S. Yep. And so this was a common thing where a lot of families were looking internationally because it was just a cheaper option. It turned out at the time, I think it might have been in India, where they put the kibosh on basically allowing foreign couples to do surrogacy there. And so that kind of changed things a little bit for you at that time.
Yeah, and I had friends who did it, and it was successful and ethical, and we felt good about it. But there's money involved, so
right, yeah,
it's complicated.
yeah. Well, going back to the cancer diagnosis, so you everything you'd already gone through, like you said, including the infertility issue, and now you get this news. Tell me about, I can imagine the mental toll that must have taken on you. You had to undergo surgery. You had to undergo 5 months of chemotherapy. You had 8 weeks of radiation. Tell me about, your mental space at that time having to deal with that.
Yeah. I'd experienced so much loss up to that point. And then, I'm finally seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. Okay, we're going to have a child of our own and be able to make a family. And then, so there's that loss of, well, you can't do that anymore. And that's for anyone that's been in fertility treatments, you are so tunnel visioned, and that's all you can think about. It is so consuming of your time, your energy, your thoughts, and, and your heart. And then to have someone tell me you can't do that anymore was devastating. But then to even then change my thinking into trying to form this family, to now I have to survive and take care of myself and make sure that I live through this cancer diagnosis. And so that was a really hard shift for me for a lot of reasons. It's hard. It's a hard thing to take in and accept. It's terrifying.
Sure, for sure. Now that was in 2013. So how are things now in terms of your health?
Oh, I'm good. I'm totally cancer free. All my, you're continually monitored by your team, and I had a great team of oncologist, surgeon. I also did saw integrative medicine doctors and did a lot of Eastern therapies integrated with Western as well. I really made it my mission and my job to get myself healthy and live. And I took a leave from my work, and I just focused on myself. There was a lot of stress and a lot of loss and a lot of grief, which I think really took a toll on myself and my immune system and my body. And I really had to heal. and get myself back into a healthy place. And so that's what I did.
Great. That's good.
Mm-hmm,
Well,
mm-hmm.
a month after completing your treatment, so a month after completing chemo and radiation, you get news about your dad.
Yeah. So, kind of going back to, years prior, many years prior, when, my dad had found my sister, who, passed away in the night. He really couldn't call, how does one recover from that, right? And he really had difficulty. And so he actually was, not taking care of himself. I was taking care of him for many years. And that was actually a pretty rough time in my life as well. Just trying to help him manage. And so at that point, he was living with my aunt in Florida while I was taking care of myself through my cancer treatment. I thought I couldn't even share with my father, the only person left in my family, that I was going through this, because there was no way he'd be able to manage it. So I did tell him towards the end of my treatment. And then in October, I was totally done with the chemo, the radiation, the surgery, and then my father gets, and we knew there was something wrong. And my extended family had taken him to a doctor, and it turned out he had lung cancer that spread to the brain. And they gave him a 3-month prognosis, and they were very accurate with that prognosis.
Really? Really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I then, I got in my car, went down to Florida, picked up my dad, took him, and he was with me. And I was with him, holding his hand and caring for him up until he passed.
Right. I mean, at least you got that time,
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Well, I want to read a quote from you. You wrote
Okay.
this. You wrote this on a website called Option B, which we spoke about off camera. Optionb.org is the URL. And this is the quote. I have learned to be grateful and find happiness every day. It is not something given to you or earned. It is something you decide.
Yeah.
You remember writing that?
I do. I do remember writing that. Yeah.
You want to expand on it a little bit?
Yeah. I'm sure, Jimmy, you get people saying the same thing to you. How did you do it? How do you go through that? How do you go on? Well, as somebody who's been through, complicated loss and complicated grief, and grief upon grief, right? Grief while you're still grieving. You don't have a choice. You can't stop it. It happened, right? You wish it didn't, but it happened. And it, you're kind of defined by these events in your life, and you learn so much from them. But I just always felt like either I curl up in a ball and I shut out the world, or I keep living and, trying to live my life and helping others, and, just trying to make the most of it and be grateful for the time that I had, and be grateful for what I've learned, and be grateful for the fact that I'm still here.
I agree. I feel like you got one life to live. And and I also feel like, there's people that depend on you, whether it be a sibling, whether it be a husband or wife, whether it be a cousin, whoever, a friend. There's people that depend on you. And I agree that curling up into a ball and
Right.
sitting in the closet, there's no benefit to anybody. And so you got to carry on. You got to move forward. And I
Right.
fully agree with that. Now, I believe that anyone experiencing grief in their life needs to find an outlet to help them cope and to help them channel it into positivity. And in my case, when my dad was diagnosed, I created a documentary about the lives of my parents. Didn't mean for that to be an outlet, but that's kind of what it became. And when my sister was diagnosed, I came up with Grappling with Grief. In your case, from what I understand, you dove into health and wellness. There was one website where I saw you described as a wellness junkie. I think it was the
Yeah.
Yoga Chicago website. They described you as a wellness junkie, and you're obviously into yoga and into different types of retreats and stuff like that. What was it that kind of made you choose that as your outlet? Health and wellness options like that.
That's a really good question. When you're faced with cancer, like somebody saying, here's the percentage of whether you're going to live or die, right? I just made a decision. So now I'm going to live, right? So I'm going to be one of those that survive. And I just after everything, like I said, after everything that I've been through, I just really felt a toll in my health, my stress, my body, my energy, and I started to just take care of myself in a different way, spiritually, holistically, food, nourishment, mindfulness, meditation, all of that. And I started to see a difference. And so I just really made it like I said, I mean, that was what I did all day long, so that I could come out of it on the other side. And then I also really delved into writing, which is how you found me.
Yes.
The power of story and the power of sharing that and putting out into the universe. And that's how you found me, by me putting it out into the universe. So.
Yep. Cool. That's cool. Now, it's one thing, to just kind of live a healthy life in terms of your diet or in terms of doing things like yoga. You took it a little step further. I read about something called TNT, True North Treks.
Sure.
And those are more like almost like expeditions. Tell me about what that is, because you've been pretty active with that.
Yeah, sure. So, there's so many amazing organizations out there that, maybe was started by somebody who had somebody in their family who had cancer, just like what you're doing with Grappling with Grief, and just want to help, right? Because you've gone through this painful experience. And so True North Treks is an organization here based in Chicago for young adults who've had cancer, because I don't know. Now more and more people, I feel like, are diagnosed. I don't know how you feel about it, but more and more young people. And, typically when you think of people with cancer, they were older. So they started this organization, True North Treks, about helping young adults survive cancer. So it's really about finding each other and supporting each other. But it's like taking you onto these treks, and it's all paid for. So you don't have to worry about the expense. And it's all young adult cancer survivors, whether you've survived cancer or you're currently diagnosed and going through treatment, it doesn't matter, and taking you into nature, to help heal you. And then along the trip, it's yoga and mindfulness, led by a yoga and mindfulness instructor, as well as, you have your outdoor trek expedition people that are taking you out. So I went on a kayak trip in the Bahamas for 5 days.
Cool.
Where we kayaked from island to island and camped on the islands in the sand at night. And then I also did a hike in the Selkirk Mountains in Idaho. And it was so healing and so therapeutic. And just that, being in that connection with other young adults who are going through cancer as well.
Nice. Well, it beats wintertime in Chicago, I bet.
Absolutely.
And Toronto, for that matter.
Right.
You mentioned writing was another outlet. And I did see your work on the Option B website and another site called classy.org, which is a fundraiser site. Are you writing anything else? Or have you thought about writing anything else? I mean, your story's book worthy, really. Have you had thoughts about it?
Yes, always.
Yeah?
I will tell you that, Jimmy, always. That is what I want to do. I want to write a book because the healing power of stories, the healing power of the writer, and then also the receiver of the story, and relating to others. And it's just yes, it's a dream of mine. Yes.
Awesome. We'll follow it. Make sure you follow it.
I will.
Good. Tell me about a nonprofit called Expanding Lives, because I understand you joined their board in 2018.
Yeah. So, okay. It's so funny. All these things in my life have become so cyclical and so serendipitous. So yes, a teacher that I work with started an organization called Expanding Lives, helping young women in West Africa have access to school. So whether that's helping with barriers that get in the way, working with the families, money, or buying school supplies, or malaria medicine so that young women can go to school. So I did a lot of work with that organization. And it's interesting because as we were talking, off camera, now I have recently adopted a little girl from West Africa.
Yeah.
And it just kind of became serendipitous. So now I have all these connections with some amazing people doing work in Africa, as well as Africans who can help me relate to my little girl and, help being connected to her culture.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question for you. My next question was going to be about this good news. You just told me about this, I think a few days ago. You mentioned it in an email. And so my next question was going to be, tell me about becoming a mom. Like, how has life changed?
Sure.
And we were joking off the air because we're filming this in October of 2020. COVID-19 still, present. And your daughter comes over from Africa, and we were joking off there that she's probably like, "This is what it's like here. Everybody's wearing masks. You can't go to the park."
Yeah, the park's always broken.
Yeah.
Weird. So after, actually it was when my father was still alive. So after I had, I had tried surrogacy, that path of having a family, I never really fully left that, right? That was something that I just felt like I wanted to do. And so here, I wasn't able to have children now after the cancer treatment. It wasn't something that would be safe for me to carry a child. So we thought adoption, right? And so actually after my cancer treatment, I had started the process. I don't know if you know anybody that has gone through the adoption process, but talk about resiliency and being able to sustain something.
Yes.
It is a part-time job filling out paperwork, and then again, the money. So my husband and I did fundraisers to raise money, and so that, to help support us in our adoption process, that's another 50 grand. So 40 to 50 grand. And so it took about 5 years until we had her, brought her home. And I will tell you, there were moments of giving up, of like, okay, I can't do this paperwork anymore. And, there's social workers that come to your house, as there should be, to make sure it's a safe environment for your children. And it definitely takes a toll, and you don't know if it's going to happen. There's so many different reasons that it might not happen. And then come March, there's these rumblings of COVID. Also, where we went to go pick up our little girl, it wasn't safe. And actually, at the time, the embassy was recommending we didn't go. I didn't even get to tell you this part, Jimmy. So we were actually in a house, quarantined because of our safety. We weren't allowed to leave the home, to the point, this is when we were in Burkina Faso was the country we adopted from. We had to bring our own camping food, like in a duffel bag, just add water. And that's what we lived out of for the 10 days we were there. We met our daughter, and we were able to bring her home safely. And then the country shut down a week later.
It's crazy. The timing was crazy. It was meant to be.
Yeah, I mean, we got her out. We got her home with us. So, yeah.
What's her name?
Her name is Delphine.
Delphine, that's a cool name.
Delphine, yeah. Uh-huh.
And you were talking about a 5-year period. That whole 5-year period, did you know Delphine was no, you didn't know. Okay.
No. So, okay, let me think back. I mean, we got matched with her almost April before we went. So like almost
about a year. Okay.
Yeah. And when I say we got matched, we got provided very minimal information for her safety and for her privacy. And then we eventually, were able to have some pictures of her, but we never got to meet her or speak to her until she came to meet up.
Wow. And how has life changed for you being a mom?
Well, my only experience being a mom is being a mom in a pandemic.
Yes, true. Yeah.
And I mean, it's filled with love and joy, but it's also filled with, challenge, as well as, for her. I mean, it was, we are also taking her from everything she knows and loves. And so we have to make her feel safe.
Right.
And just letting her know she's in a loving family. And, she missed her friends. I mean, she's 5, and that's a big deal. And just really trying to work at keeping her connected to her culture, and really trying to help her have such a rich and also typical life during this whole pandemic, and doing remote learning kindergarten.
Yeah. I'm with you. I have 2, a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. Online learning is not what it's cracked up to be. It's not, 20 minutes and they want to go do something else.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't blame them. And I'm also remote learning from home. I work in a high school, so I'm on the other end, remote learning, trying to help her remote learning. So we're making it work.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think that for you to overcome all the adversity that you did and come out the other side a happy and strong and positive person, which you obviously are, I think it says a lot about your character. And I'm really happy that you became a mom and I think you're going to be a great one. And for you to, like you said, come out the other side and be so positive about everything, it really says a lot about your ability to handle adversity and how resilient you are. And I hope you write that book. Don't give up on that dream.
I'm not going to. Thank you.
Good. Well, we've been talking to Jenny Hahne, wellness junkie. That's going to be what I call you when we promote this. Wellness junkie. Jenny Hahne, thanks for your time. Really pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. Thanks for the work that you're doing.
Thank you very much.